You have grabbed.
We have the quarterback of the Kansas State Wildcats, Big 12 champion Will Howard.
So excited to announce Kansas City Sports Network's new soccer channel.
They're taking advantage of a look that they utilized earlier in the game to show them a jet sweep motion.
It's a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise.
You kind of root for guys to have those moments, and that was certainly a big moment.
Welcome into Mizzou, That's Who, your podcast from Missouri Athletics here on KC Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to the Border War podcast.
Welcome back. Another episode of Ain't No Season podcast.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
It's a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Ken Swanson. I'm new to this show. If you've been watching on Thursdays only lately, you haven't seen me. I apologize for that. I'm going to be gone this Thursday as well. Here on Thursdays, Maddie Lane, though. Hi, Matthew.
Welcome back, Kent. It's nice to see you here. It's nice to see your face. I'm glad you were here. Craig is great, and I'm glad that you are here, Kent, to talk about Chiefs training camp with us. Seeming you did miss the last time that we talked about training camp because you weren't here on the past few 8 Thursdays.
My favorite part about this podcast, by the way, I'm Craig Stout. My favorite part about this podcast is the part where Kent's going to bring up points that Maddie and I brought up last Thursday and the Thursday before and talk about it, be like, man, I can't, like, nobody's really talking about this. And literally he's sitting with two people that are talking about
My
it.
favorite is it's going to come at the end of like a 98-second just like speech. And then he's going to ask us our thoughts. And it's going to be something that we spent 10 minutes on last week.
Yep.
Guys,
We miss you and love you, Kent.
I miss you too. And also, I think Deneric Prince might make this team. I don't know what you guys feel about that, but thank you, everyone that is hanging out with us today. It is exciting. It's always fun to be talking about real football things, or the closest we can get to real football things this time of year. We are back into the swing of things. Camp is in full swing. We're going to be getting, games sooner rather than later. Some storylines have come out. You got Albert Breer coming into Chiefs training camp and kind of getting, his eyes on this team and getting to talk to the people and some of the boots on the ground there, getting to kind of hear from different people within the building. And, there's some interesting nuggets that came out. You saw his article about Mahomes, and there's some stuff we might get to that too. But one of the things he's kind of talking about earlier in the week as he's kind of doing his team by team camp preview is talking about the Chiefs offensive line and how it might be the best that they've had in Andy Reid's tenure here. I know, the interior offensive line is unbelievable. It's exceptional. I think when we're having the conversation, though, about whether or not this is the best offensive line, it kind of surrounds it's the tackles. Like, it's really the tackles is, I think, where the conversation really lies. But I want to just ask you, Maddie Lane, off the top, is this the best offensive line that the Kansas City Chiefs have had in Andy Reid's tenure, in Patrick Mahomes' tenure?
No, because Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher once played offensive tackle on the same offensive line. And while the interior of that offensive line wasn't as good as the interior of this offensive line, tackles are more important. And they still had an LDT playing around in there who was a very good player at the time. Like, that offensive line is still better. I guess the Super Bowl winning offensive line for 2019 is probably, that's the best offensive line they had because they were better at the more important position. They were more proven at the more important position. We knew what Mitchell Schwartz and what a healthy Eric Fisher, I know he was hurt that year and played back to the playoff run, but we know what those guys were able to do when they were healthy in this system. It wasn't a question. It wasn't up in the air. It wasn't a, rising Jawan Taylor. It wasn't a Donovan Smith coming off of his worst season in the NFL trying to rebound on a new team. They were known commodities at the two positions that matter a little bit more. You did have some competent play across the interior offensive line as well. So, no, I don't quite see the ceiling for this unit this year being better than that team, but can it be better than any other version of this offensive line? Yeah, probably.
I mean, and I can even go back to like 2016's offensive line. That was Eric Fisher, Zach Fulton, Mitch Morse, LDT, and Mitchell Schwartz. That is a really good set of players. Now, that being said, I can see this offensive line contending with that because you've got a first-team All-Pro, your center in Creed Humphrey. You've got an All-Pro in Joe Thuney. And you've got a guy that I'd probably lump in the top 5 right tackles in the game right now in Jawan Taylor. And, the other positions, the right guard position is really good in Trey Smith. The question mark is just with Donovan Smith there. So that's why when Breer releases this article, and this is his quote right here, he says, of course, the pads aren't on yet, and things can change, but the Chiefs actually feel this might be the best set of bookends they've had at the position since Patrick Mahomes became the starter in 2018. In 2018, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz were still on this team and arguably playing at the top of their game at that point. I think everybody remembers them getting hurt and the way that their careers kind of petered out for both of those guys. I don't mean to take anything away from them. Injuries suck. But those guys in 2018 were amazing. Mitchell Schwartz was an all-pro right tackle, and Eric Fisher was a top 10 left tackle in the league. That is hard to come by. And so the bar is very high. So for that to be the comment that comes out, and again, it's a might, it's without pads, it's all these caveats on here for the Chiefs here, but for them, somebody in that building to even be considering that these guys might be on the level of those guys, that is ridiculously high praise for this offensive line.
I think the Chiefs have the best interior line in all of football. I think they have an elite group along that interior. It's going to be really hard for you to talk me out of that 3. It's just an exceptional group. Jawan Taylor, by all indications, been very good to this point. And what little I've been able to see looks great. And again, it is still early. Pads haven't been on very long at this point now. That you've got 4 pretty lock solid players right there. And then there's just one pivot point that I think determines the ceiling, if you will, of this tackle position. It's Donovan Smith. And how far and how high of a level he's able to play this year, coming back from an injury, had played solid in prior years, had better seasons in prior years than last year. His ceiling almost determines what kind of statements and grand statements you're able to make about the totality of this offensive line. I think you still have a chance to be able to make some of those statements regardless, because the Chiefs have been able to get by with, maybe a sub prime tackle in the past. But it's kind of interesting to me. And we've talked a little bit about this, and this is kind of last year with the tackles, even though the tackles may not be better when it's all said and done than this year's group. And, they might, this year's group might be better. Last year's tackle group felt very set it and forget it for me. When we've talked about the offseason for this team and on the offensive line, that's one of the other storylines with receiver, we have all these conversations all summer about receiver and, hey, what's the tackle situation going to look like? How do we feel about, protecting Mahomes' blind side with a bounce back Donovan Smith? Those are 2 of the big storylines. And last year it was just kind of set it and forget it with the offensive line. We weren't talking about it. We knew what the Chiefs were, Andrew Wiley was playing at a high level. Orlando Brown was what he was, you knew what you were getting with Orlando Brown. This year, it just, it does feel like they'll be able to clear that group with a decent performance from Donovan Smith. Maddie, how good does Donovan Smith have to play for this to be the best offensive line in Patrick Mahomes' tenure?
I mean, in his tenure,
Patrick Mahomes' tenure, yeah.
Yeah. You're still going back to getting the 2 offensive tackles of Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher. So Donovan Smith would have to have essentially his best. I think Donovan Smith would have to have his best career year.
Okay.
In his career.
Okay. I'm saying offsetting. You've got the interior line that can offset that a little bit.
Yeah,
that is incredible.
Interior offensive line is not offensive tackle, though, to me. I think I watched the Chiefs' offensive line last year. they had to spend a lot of time sending help and delaying guys going out into pass protection and keeping running backs in to help the tackles who ultimately didn't play bad. Like Andrew Wiley and Orlando Brown Jr. were far from bad last year. It's just the Chiefs had to do a lot schematically and how they lined up and how they ran plays to help them. So if they're having to do that again, regardless of if Jawan Taylor's a little bit better than what Orlando Brown Jr. Gave them last year or not, it doesn't matter. There's no chance if they're having to help either one of the offensive tackles the way they had to help Wiley and again in some matchups Orlando Brown Jr., that this offensive line will touch the complete Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher entirely on islands. We can get to 5 out anytime we want to. And oh, by the way, Schwartz and Fisher are so good, they're shutting down the B gap before they're blocking their defensive end on an island. So having that interior offensive line that wasn't as good as this year's didn't matter because they were essentially blocking A.5 to A.5. because they were getting so much help in the B gap. So I think it's hard to compete when you have 2 offensive tackles that can play that way. I don't think the Chiefs are going to have 2 offensive tackles that can play that way this year. You're hoping as a Chiefs fan that you get one. You're hoping Jawan Taylor can do that on just his side alone. And then that way you only have to help on one side. And that does open up at least more flexibility. But to your initial point, Donovan Smith would have to have the best year of his career, I think, to compete with those lines. And that's just because I value the offensive tackle position and what it allows the Chiefs offense to do just that much higher than the interior offensive line.
Now, I can make the case that these offensive linemen, these offensive tackles specifically, are maybe a little better fit for what Andy Reid and Andy Heck want to do. Definitely. I mean, yes. I have throughout the offseason here, having somebody that can do the sorts of things and move the way that, Jawan Taylor with the kind of length that he's got, it checks almost all the boxes for Andy Reid, Andy Heck. So he's like an ideal fit there. And then Orlando Brown Jr. checked the length box, but the movement skills, the techniques and everything like that those guys wanted him to play with, he didn't do particularly well. So they just kind of rolled with, hey, this is what you do well. You allow a guy to get into your chest and you just kind of lock him up and go through all of that. And it worked. He got by with it. But that's certainly not the way that the offensive line, Andy Heck specifically, wants his guys to play. Donovan Smith definitely going to play more like Andy Heck wants him to play. So I can see an avenue towards the Chiefs looking at the techniques that these guys play with, looking at the ways that they carry themselves, the way that they can move, and saying, hey, we really feel good about this offensive tackle group, especially considering these are the best guards that we've had inside elite tackles with Patrick Mahomes here. So we're going to feel comfortable with Donovan Smith not having to check back inside with Joe Thuney very often, and just being able to get up the arc, being able to work up there because Joe Thuney's got it handled. You can even make the argument that Donovan Smith's best year was Ali Marpet's best year at left guard beside him, because Ali Marpet was playing so well that allowed Donovan Smith to be a little bit more on an island, not have to worry about his inside shoulder as much. Now you cut to last year with Donovan Smith, Ali Marpet's not there anymore. They don't have a guy at left guard that they were really confident in. Now you're putting him next to another all-pro player and Joe Thuney again. So I can see the avenues towards them making this very grandiose statement here. I can even see an avenue with Donovan Smith where you're looking at it and you're going, we're comfortable lining up a tight end off of him. Gronk was there when he was really good. And Gronk is a guy that's going to draw a lot of attention, can run block, can pass block, can chip, can offer all that. Oh, yeah, and the defensive end's going to chip him as well, so it's going to slow him down. We're going to be able to offer a lot of help to Donovan Smith, and our running backs are pretty good in pass pro. So we can protect against anything and everything that's coming off the left side of the line there, because we know the other 4 positions are just really going to be able to lock things down and hold it down.
I have one more offensive tackle question to ask you, but I'm going to ask you right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Hey, I do want to make sure to shout everybody that did participate in the KCSN Foundation golf tournament this weekend. Anybody that donated at the KCSN golf tournament this weekend, it was an unbelievable success. I don't know if the numbers have been released yet, but wow. Thank you all for helping continue to fund all the initiatives that we have here at KC Sports Network through the KCSN Foundation. Had a lot of fun. It was great meeting a lot of you. it was fun to not have COVID this time. That was kind of cool. I can guarantee you both, no one had more fun at the KCSN golf tournament than Tucker D. Franklin. That man was on one on Saturday. Anyways, I mentioned I had a question. And, you get stuff from an Albert Breer, and they're making statements like this might be the best tackle group, best. Sometimes you wonder maybe who he heard it from. And I'm not going to ask you who you think he heard it from, because I don't know. I have zero clue. But this is going to be a pure speculation question when I ask this, but do you think Andy Heck, I'm going to start with you, Craig, because you spent a bunch of time writing articles. Do you think Andy Heck likes this year's tackle group more than last year's tackle group?
Oh, more than last year's?
Yeah, just last year's.
Yeah, I do. And it's entirely got to do with Orlando Brown Jr. Again, they tried with Orlando Brown Jr. They tried to do some of the things that are Andy Heck hallmarks from a technique standpoint. And they just at a certain point said, hey, listen, man, we're messing with your game too much. Like, we're just going to let you be you. So, which is great. Andy Heck can adapt to all those things. But yes, certainly. Now, I think he loved Andrew Wiley. Like, I really think he loved Andrew Wiley, because Andrew Wiley was very moldable, did everything that he wanted him to do and everything like that. But I do think Orlando Brown Jr. tried to do some of those things. It was messing with his game too much. So they just said, no, let's not do it anymore. So yes, absolutely. I think he does.
Maddie, you had one more thing on the tackles. Is that right?
Well, not even tackles, just the offensive line, because we were talking a lot about this offensive line being the best the Chiefs ever had. And I did want to add a little caveat here. I think if you move this offensive line to various teams around the NFL, there are plenty of teams where this year's offensive line does have the potential to be better than any of the other ones in the Chiefs' history, because of how dominant that interior can be in the run game. And then even Donovan Smith is a very good run blocker. So if the Chiefs are a team that like to run the ball more, pound the rock, get a little bit more varied and lean on their run game, I would definitely buy into the ceiling of this offensive line unit being higher than some of those Fisher-Schwartz combo ones that the Chiefs had in the past, right? Like, I would feel a little bit better about it in that regard, or like going along with that potential in that regard. But for the current iteration of the Chiefs offense, it's all about pass protection. It's pass protection 100%. That's what matters. That's all that matters. And it's going to be really hard to ever compete with those two offensive tackles playing at the level they were while they were. So I just want to get that out there. Is I don't want to completely say, oh, the interior offensive line doesn't matter or anything like that. I just do think it's stylistic. So this offensive line would be a lot better for a team that wanted to lean on the run game a little bit more.
It's going to rewind 12 minutes ago, and you're like, yeah.
I do kind of want to point out here, we're comparing it a lot to the 2022 offensive line. Going into the season, there were multiple different media publications that said the Chiefs had the best offensive line in football, including ESPN, going into last season. And that was with Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley out there. So, I mean, like, if we're comparing it to this one that was just kind of regarded very well, now we all know that it didn't turn out to be the best offensive line in football, but it ended up being pretty damn good by the end of the year. That's high praise to say that they're going to go leapfrog over last year's group.
One other quick note on the offensive line before we move on. It sounds like Wanye Morris got involved with the first team, both sides, left and right, giving some breathers to both of those tackles. You'll love to see that. Very fascinating to see his development. That's one of the guys I was most excited, to kind of get eyes on at some point here. And obviously, I think he kind of had a little bit of a slow start, but kind of speeding back up and all that. It's really exciting to see him getting some of those involved. People were really worried, like the first day when he was with the third team. I was like, well, he's behind the eight ball because he didn't start with everybody in camp. He was missing a little bit of time early on. Of course, like that's how the Chiefs have done historically. So like I wasn't too beat up about a rookie who didn't start practices immediately with the rest of his team being on the third team at the tackle spot. I think that will continue to ramp up. They know what they have in Wanye Morris. It's the identical measurables to Jawan Taylor. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't know. I think they like a certain type of guy over there. And I'm excited to see what Wanye is going to do here the rest of the year. Maddie, we've had some news since we've all last been on. Najee Johnson, a guy that's been playing a lot of cornerback snaps, goes out, tears his ACL on Saturday. He was getting a lot of love, getting some opportunities with the first team. First off, it's just a bummer to see him, have his season end so quickly.
I mean, yeah, we just talked about him last week and him pushing into the first team to get some reps right before the pads come on, and just kind of where that was leaving him moving forward. And even Greg and I kind of ended talking about how we thought he probably has a better slot corner profile than some other guys that were getting second team reps in that regard. It's like everything seemed to be trending up, and then you've had nothing but praise from Dave Toub for him going forward on special teams. And then he comes out and Saturday practice, he tears his ACL. You never want to see that for any player, but especially a second-year guy, a young guy that was seeming to really find his footing and really be on the rise. I mean, that stinks for him. Thankfully for the Chiefs, the quarterback room oddly is an area where they, I guess, can handle an injury now. Like, as weird as that says, you never want to have to test it, but it's one of the few positions where losing a player, especially a guy that was fighting to be more of a depth guy, probably isn't the biggest deal anymore as a defensive pack spot for the Chiefs. So speedy recovery to him. Unfortunate for him, but like for the Chiefs, they have a lot of bodies back there that I think are probably ready to contribute if they have to.
I thought it was really kind of cool of Steve Spagnuolo to go out of his way to just kind of shower praise on Najee Johnson today. Like, come out and it's like, man, it really sucks to lose that guy. Like, we love him. We love the way that he's grown into that role. Said he was taking reps with the first team because he earned it, stuff like that are just positive things that you're going to see, that you're going to have, coming out of there. But yeah, it sucks. That was a guy that, as much as anybody can be, was a potential tide turner on special teams, a guy that can really make some plays, pin the opposing offense back as a gunner, be able to do a little bit on, various other special teams facets. Like, he was a guy that Dave Toub was super excited about. And the fact that the Chiefs were running Najee Johnson with the ones on defense, and Steve Spagnuolo had so many positive things. This guy was probably never going to be a superstar as a corner in this league by any means, but was going to be a significant contributor for this special teams unit and mix in a little bit on defense here and there. It was going to be a guy that was going to be a very important part to this team. He's one of those glue guys. Like, he's going to be like the 40 to 50 on the roster that is just so important and was going to play out his entire rookie deal here. So, best of luck to him. I hope the ACL injury, I hope that repair gets in there. They get it fixed up. Everything's good and he can rehab quickly. I am excited to see that talent back on the field.
I feel bad for Najee, and obviously pushing two guys in Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson that had such big moments in the playoffs, in that, whole Super Bowl run thing that they did earlier in 2023. Being able to push those guys and challenge those guys the way it seemed like he was, and the way the coaching staff was kind of saying he was, man, that tells you something. And it's a bummer to see, that end so quickly. You heard Steve Spagnuolo making comments about some of these, one of the second-year corners kind of getting into some of the old habits. It was basically either Joshua Williams or Jalen Watson the way it got. It was one of the two. I don't know. You might be able to deduce. Yeah, Craig's got it, but
yeah.
But whether or not Najee Johnson still, he had some stiff competition. There's some really quality players there, obviously, that are just going to have to rise to the occasion and break through that second year wall that some of these guys do hit. Special teams is where things could get really dicey for this team. You heard Dave Toub say that Najee Johnson was the best gunner in football at the end of the year last year. He was good. We talked about this. Like, we were watching, just if I can't sleep some nights, I'll randomly just put a game on, and I was watching Najee Johnson gunner reps, and it was good.
You degenerate.
You'll never guess how much cover two.
I will guess.
I bet, yeah. Craig's got that one, actually.
You got that number. But Maddie, you did want to talk a little bit about some ramifications of that and some of the special team stuff, pending that after that Najee Johnson news. So let's hear it.
Yeah, the Chiefs are in a bit of an interesting spot, I guess, with special teams because Najee Johnson was getting all this praise as being the team's top gunner, and like that praise has been steady throughout the whole thing. But he still played on less than 100 special team snaps last year for the Chiefs. He wasn't doing it often. In fact, Chris Lamont was the guy who led the Chiefs in special teams reps. Well, guess who is not currently on the roster? That's Chris Lamont. The thought would be Najee Johnson would step into that role as he did down the stretch last year and was becoming a very good gunner. They lose him now. That's a lot of special teams reps. That's a lot of like guys they were relying on special teams kind of off the roster. And you would assume guys like Brian Cook, who are going to be taking over a bigger role in defense, probably aren't going to play the vast majority of the all the special teams reps they possibly can anymore. So then it comes down is where is that being replaced? We've talked a lot this year about guys that might not make the 53. Deion Bush has been a popular name for all of us to leave off the 53-man roster. Guess who played the second most special teams snaps for the Chiefs last year? Deion Bush. So is this now, does he just get a not free slot, but does he now just get a slot based entirely around being able to eat up special teams reps from Najee Johnson going out, from them not having a Chris Lamont, from them not having a Marcus Kemp who came, they was elevated last year, but he played a lot of special teams reps the 3 weeks he was elevated. Or is this the window the Chiefs needed to get 7 wide receivers on the roster? And they use this 7th wide receiver as a special teams gunner only. Like, what do they do to fill this role? Did they just that? I mean, that's my thing. That's where my head immediately went was, is this a sneaky way for them to go ahead and get that extra wide receiver in there because they know what they need an extra special teams player now?
Ooh, all right. So this kind of stems from some thoughts that I had. And can we spell out the wide receiver room here real quick? We've got
we did 2 Thursdays ago, but yeah.
No, Kadarius Toney's not. I'm assuming Kadarius Toney will not be an IR, a season-ending IR. So you've got to carry him on the initial 53.
Initial 53. Yes. Yeah.
Sky Moore, Rashee Rice, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Justin Watson, Richie James, Justin Ross. There's your 7. Okay. So
the first 5 of those guys plus Justin Ross probably don't play that much special teams, by the way.
Exactly. Well, this is the question. This is this. I don't know if this matters. I don't know if this matters to that conversation. This is where it gets interesting. So you maybe it's Kadarius Toney's carried on the initial 53, goes to the IR. I believe he can come back after 4 weeks, right? So if he's not ready by week 1, it's week, whatever. You could do that. And then that gives you a little bit of flexibility on the back end of that. But I don't think that do they carry 7 wide receivers on the initial 53, IR Kadarius, and then bring somebody back into the mix? And this is where I was having a conversation with somebody about Justin Ross. And we can have a little Justin Ross conversation here in a minute if we really want to. He looks good. Let's say he's in the mix to make the 53-man roster. They have a plan for him offensively. He's still wide receiver 5 at best, and he doesn't have special teams value. Like, I don't know. There's some logjam and some numbers there to take into consideration as well. Let's talk a little bit more about this, some of the roster construction at the bottom after this break.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
We're talking a little roster construction and special teams after Najee Johnson, a presumed special team stud and a special team stud in the back end of last year, goes down. Looking through some scenarios, Maddie, you're talking about, 7 wide receivers. Maybe 7 come on initially. They put, Kadarius Toney on IR. Maybe they can sneak Deion Bush on the practice squad or through waivers initially. That's one scenario I do want to throw at you. Maybe Deion Bush is a guy that they might be able to just, put on waivers, put through the process, and then they're going to be able to sneak him back after somebody goes on IR.
Yeah, I think there's probably Deion Bush or Blake Bell would be another good candidate for that. A guy that's going to be on the week 1 active roster, definitely. And a guy that they got pretty late in the process. Nobody was really clamoring for it, sort of deal. Like, I can definitely see that sort of thing happening with that individual, as long as they're okay with it, obviously, trying to sneak that guy on there. That makes the most sense to me. But yeah, I think Deion Bush almost becomes as close to a lock as you can get after the injury to Najee Johnson. I mean, yeah, we talked about all those wide receivers. We talked about all those guys. Justin Ross is working out with the special teams units right now. Like they're putting
trying
him through his paces. They're trying to find, room for him there.
He's returning.
He's returning. Yeah, I know. Which he did, I believe, in high school. Is that correct? Something like that. Anyway, he's done it before, but
Probably.
it's been so long since he has, and injury history and all of that is what it is. So I know that they're trying to find ways to get him on the field on special teams and all of that. But yes, I think that the clear path here is if they are going to IR Kadarius Toney, keep one of these veterans that is going to be a special teams contributor, just cut him, immediately turn around and pick that guy back up, because nobody at this point is probably adding a Blake Bell or a Deion Bush to their active rosters on cutdown day.
So we're just over here sleeping on the next Marcus Kemp, but with return ability and Nico Remigio. He's waiting right there. He's lurking in the wings. He gunned a little bit. He gunned a little bit in college. Listen, you watch the videos. I haven't been out of camp this year. Actually, none of us have yet, have we? Can't you not been out there? No. Okay, so we haven't been out of camp, but I'm watching the videos. He moves like an NFL player. Like I'm not saying he's good. I'm not saying anything. He moves like an NFL player, and it jumps off a little bit. I know he's a quality returner, or at least was in college. I do know he played some Vice, some Gunner stuff in college. Like that was part of his game. So I think if you want to make a path that this opens up an extra spot for a receiver of some kind, whether that is a brief stint if Toney is going to an IR situation once he's on the initial 53, or whether it's just getting an extra body, he's a guy to keep an eye on. I don't know what the Chiefs think of him as a gunner. I have no idea. Nobody has said a word about it. We just know in the past, they have not been afraid to keep a wide receiver as one of their special team stars. If he proves out to be that guy, that matters. Because for as much as we talk about, like, is Richie, or maybe Richie James does it too. I don't mean to leave him out. Maybe Richie James decides, hey, yeah, I'm a veteran in the NFL now, but I'm willing to go be a gunner like I was early in my career. Or Justin Watson really didn't do that for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Didn't do it for the Chiefs at all last year, though. So
he might need him a little bit more now.
That's hard to do with the starting wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
You bet. Well, okay.
I mean, seriously, like they need consistency out there, and especially week one, you're gonna rely on a rookie wide receiver and Sky Moore to come out there and do all of that, like
solely based on the clips I've seen. Yes,
I mean, I would love it. Don't get me wrong, but I can see Andy Reid's offense saying, "Hey, I want a guy that's gonna be in all the right places and block really well and do all of that." And Justin Watson.
Nico Remigio, one of the things that I think is worth noting, 187 pounds, 5'9", doesn't scream gunner, doesn't scream Dave Tobe gunner. I'm trying to think of a gunner that small for Dave Tobe in recent memory. And like, that's where I don't know if that's necessarily in his wheelhouse. I think Nico Remigio as a potential special teams value add guy in the return game or something like that might be just the perfect practice squad elevation early in the season until there's some attrition kind of move. Like that's the route I see. I think Nico Remigio is going to be at minimum and most likely a special teams player, but he's a special teams player that you're like, he might get the call up here. He might be one of those activations. I see him like, that's the kind of role I see for him. There's a name you guys haven't brought up yet as a beneficiary to all this. And a beneficiary is not a great word, but you get what I'm saying. The opportunity there. It's Nick Jones. Nick Jones is another guy that Dave Tobe has touted as a core special teams player potentially down the road. He's got ginormous hands, length. He's blocked kicks. He's been a core special in the past. So is Shamari Connor. I think those are two guys that can pick up the slack. Maybe not Shamari, not necessarily as a gunner. Nick Jones maybe as a gunner though. Those two guys I think can pick up the slack, the slack as special teams contributors in a big way. I think this is a great opportunity for Nick Jones to make this roster and be a special teams contributor, Maddie.
I mean, it's possible. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know who's impressing during gunning drills and the special teams meetings or anything like that. Like, I don't know. I was putting out a name out there of another guy that I know has played special teams in college and done so well. So that's why I put Remigio's name out there. It could be Nick Jones. It could be Connor. It's I don't think Deion Bush is going to be a gunner either. So like, while I agree with Craig that he said earlier that he's kind of a lock, they still do need guys to be there on the outside, and you do need vices. And like, we don't know who those guys are going to be yet. I do also want to say, you can dog on Remigio's size, but Nazeeh Johnson, 5'10", he's 199 pounds, but still only 5'10".
It's 12 pounds more.
Nick Jones, 6 foot, but 189 pounds. That's a string bean right there. It's not like these guys are huge. It's not like these gunners are huge. You made it sound like he had like 6'5" behemoths out there.
Now, hang on.
Dentari Poe.
Don't you dare. Now I have a new goal in life.
Don't tell me with a good time.
Listen, we saw Tano. We saw passing you out there on some kick coverage.
We did. And it was glorious.
And natural.
I mean, that being said, like, you've got a guy in Nazeeh Johnson that plays safety, like not afraid to come up and hit, not afraid to come up and tackle, do all of that stuff. Nico Remigio is a wide receiver. Like, Marcus Kemp, listen, he grew into that.
He was an anomaly. And real quick, I want to add, Nazeeh Johnson has some safety background at Marshall. Craig's not saying he's a safety only because obviously he's been playing.
He was playing corner for this team. Safety at Marshall.
He had some safety background when he's had some safety background as well. Sorry, I was just clarifying.
No. I appreciate that.
Please continue.
I think that the two spots that we can almost lock in at this point are the returners, barring an injury. Basically, it's been Richie James at punt returner. Like first go almost all the time. Yeah, sure. They're rotating other guys in and stuff like that. But it's always been Richie James. Dave Tobe talked about how excited he is for Richie James in punt return. And then it's Deneric Prince as a kick returner. So much so that Dave Tobe went out of his way to say, you guys remember when I had Nile Davis returning kicks and how awesome that was? That dude wears the same number and he reminds me of him a lot. So I think those two, the excitement level for Dave Tobe, I think those two are just absolute locks for those two returner spots at this point.
Guys, I think that Deneric Prince guy is pretty good. I don't know about you. I don't know if you've talked about that at all whatsoever.
No, not at all. Hey, let's go off on a Deneric Prince tangent, Kent. How about you lead and then ask us our opinion?
Hey,
sure.
Kent, who would you compare him to as a player? Like who would you compare him to as a player in the NFL?
Have you seen my tweet?
No.
Okay. So, we both put out our, I mean, like I've had the same comp for a long time, but like we've all kind of we both talked about our general comps on how we might see him used. And so I was just curious what yours was.
It's not like a complete player for player like comp, but like,
come on, coward.
I've seen Damian Williams and Deneric Prince. Like, I feel like we've seen the Chiefs use a big, powerful, fast, soft-handed running back in the past that maybe doesn't have elite vision, but can hit some home runs and hit some big plays. There's some stuff that reminds me of Damian Williams. And like, you're looking at the traits that the Chiefs have had success with these running backs. Undrafted too, Damian and Deneric, but obviously Damian was way undrafted and it was years before he was a Chief. But like, I don't know. I think there's an archetype the Chiefs have been able to find success with. It's big, dense, fast, capable of catching the ball, good on the edge type runners. I mean, that's what we've seen a lot of lately. And so I kind of there's a little bit of Damian Williams to me with Deneric Prince. Was that where you guys went?
That's where Maddie went.
That's where I went. Yeah. That's where I've been with him now. I
gotta delete my tweet now.
Yeah, you do. Craig,
did you know I tweeted that?
No.
Craig went with Darrell Williams.
The usage. Yeah.
The usage. Right. And so there the usage. And there I got to it because I thought about it with Damian Williams and the Chiefs. Yes, I agree with the athleticism, the type of player he is, but Damian Williams and the Chiefs wasn't overly utilized as more of like a vertical receiver as a running back. They tried a couple times. It never seemed like a big part of their game. Whereas with Darrell Williams, they very much did try to push him downfield. And from what we've seen from training camp, they are testing Deneric Prince vertically as a receiver, and he is passing all of the tests, it seems like. So it's just, I'm with you on the player comp, but I liked Craig's idea of the usage specifically for me, at least in the receiving game of Darrell Williams, because they oddly pushed him vertical a lot. Or like even thinking back to Kareem Hunt, where they pushed him vertically up the seams and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, I think they might try to do that with Prince a little bit more than they did with Damian Williams back in the day, or than they've done with some other running backs that they've had recently.
So Damian Williams, and one of the things actually, I think Deneric Prince's body control to pair with the soft hands reminds me of Damian Williams a little bit more. Daryl, like, he does the high point stuff, but like, I remember there's the shoot route that Damian Williams ran in the Super Bowl, or not in the Super Bowl, in the playoffs against the Houston Texans in the comeback blowout, where it was behind him and he had to kind of catch it on his hip.
No,
And it's like Deneric kind of has some of that
Damian's
body
a great
control.
receiver.
Yeah.
Damian always was. They just never used him as anything.
Like
they mostly used him as a check down or as a quick into
swing
the flat
route,
flare out to the flat, hit that late as a check down. Yeah.
And see, I still feel like I'll believe it when I see it with some more of the route stuff. Like, I still feel like a lot of the stuff with Deneric's been base stuff out of the backfield. So it's a lot of the swing routes, but he's just looking really comfortable and confident.
I don't know. I've seen a couple clips of him going up on some DBs and making some diving catches downfield.
Too small, anyone?
Kent's not going to believe it until Deneric Prince mosses Jonathan Abram. That's what it's going to take for him to
here's
get
the
on board
problem,
with this.
Craig. Jonathan Abram has to be in the league for him to do that.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
I guess you got to find the new target. Fun fact, I'm backpedaling here a little bit. Richie James' punt return average over his career, less than what Justin Watson's was last year for the Chiefs. He's been a very good punt returner in the NFL, by the way. I just want to lob that out there.
Richie James also, the yards after catch was below league average. Like, well below league average,
like
too.
He's
So
not a great ball carrier.
Yeah, he's not good at, like, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Like, some guys can get nowhere fast, and that might be the case. This is me not dunking on Richie James. It's just like, that might just be, he has some elusiveness and there's some flexibility how he runs routes, but it may not always translate to being able to run after the catch.
He's an enigma because his kick return stats are good, but he's not like, usually good kick returners are just one cut and go, a little bit bigger, just straight blazers. So, and his kick return stats are actually pretty good. His punt return stats are pretty bad. And that's usually where smaller, quicker guys excel. So it's funny looking at him that way. But that was just to the point earlier when we said like Richie James is locked into the punt returner. Maybe he is, but through 4 years in the NFL, he's not been that good at it. So, like, I hope it's not locked in, because that seems to be like a little bit of an area that they could maybe be leaving a little bit of meat on the bone if we're not going to even let it be a competition.
I don't know. Here's the thing for me. It's like, just catch the ball and let Patrick
Justin
Mahomes
Watson can do that.
Yeah.
Justin Watson did do that. Why are we acting like he didn't mostly just fair catch the ball?
Justin
his
Watson's
returns were better.
That's
and his
why.
returns were better.
Because
I don't know.
It's because Justin Watson's still on the field as a vice. That's why.
I believe in Dave Tobe. Those short shorts are coming out any day now.
God, they need to. But the special teams is in shambles right now because he's got them lengthy guys going.
Hey, before we get out of here, is there anything you guys want to touch on that you've seen, heard, or anything of training camp before we dip?
Yeah. I thought it was very good that the Chiefs put Steve Spagnuolo and Felix Anudike-Uzomah on the podium the same day and had a lot of conversations about him getting up to speed and all of that sort of stuff. First of all, talking about Felix and all of that, he admitted, it's like, I'm behind the ball. I'm playing catch up right now. I'm just trying to learn, just trying to absorb everything possible, and Steve Spagnuolo even said, we're not putting any expectations on this guy. And I don't want anybody to put any expectations on this guy. It's very clearly, it's like, hey, this is our long-term move. And we're more than willing to take as much time as we need to get this guy up to speed. So I know a lot of people have been kind of, where is he? Why is he not making more noise? The pads came on. This is when he's supposed to start making moves and stuff like that. It just takes time. I'm glad that they put him out there. And then I'm also glad that Steve Spagnuolo, when he was asked about his DBs and covering this wide receiver group and all that, his first thing out of his mouth was, man, boy, that Sky Moore pops, doesn't he? Like, when your defensive coordinator is just like, yeah, this guy's a handful for us this season, whereas he wasn't last season, that's a very positive thing. So really liked everything basically out of Steve Spagnuolo this week, but I like that he level set Felix and that he took note of Sky Moore today.
Maddie, anything?
I like that the Chiefs' defensive backs, the defense as a whole, apparently seem to be getting under the Chiefs' offensive skin quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I want my defenders to do that. It's maybe not always best when it's like the third string defensive backs. Maybe you want some of the starters also to be in on the drawing, but it is. I like that as a concept. I think that's a good thing to carry like going forward. I really like seeing Jalen Watson come away with the pick and then hold the ball and use his other hand to be in the middle of like the pushing match, like only one-handed. Like that just shows you like you're trying to tell them that you're better than them. That's equivalent of too smalling somebody, pushing them with one hand while holding the ball you intercepted. Like that's good enough. I mean, that's really about it. I'm assuming Craig and I are going to talk more about camp on Thursday. Takes now.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, kid, do you have takes, buddy? What are your camp takes? What are your takes on Travis Kelce fighting everybody who comes within his field of vision?
Let me unload the clip. Let me unload the clip because I won't be back until Monday. And I will be back Monday. I changed my flights, guys. Just so you know.
Kit was pacing not to be back until after the first preseason game
was like,
a couple days ago.
I was taking 2023 off. I just
see us in September.
Man, I tell you what, it's been a weird summer. Let's just say that. The only note that I thought was kind of interesting sounded like BJ Thompson was doing some good things up the arc, which was kind of cool to see, giving some fits. That's always fun. I'm excited to see him in a more game setting because we saw him at the Shrine Bowl. He's playing a little bit heavier than he played at Stephen F. Well, a lot heavier. If you watch Stephen F. Austin versus like where he was at the Shrine Bowl, there's some noticeable density. And, he still looked the part athletically. I'm really excited to kind of get eyes on him, kind of as the process goes on in some live settings, how he plays the run, if he's able to play the run, those kind of things. So real quick before we get out of here, has your confidence level in a Chris Jones extension heightened or lowered since the last time we talked about it? Maddie, higher or lower?
An extension?
Yes.
Lower. An extension, lower. It is lower now than it was the last time we talked about Chris Jones being extended by the Kansas City Chiefs.
How much lower?
I'm coming up to the point to where I'm curious if he will be on the Chiefs team for the 2024 season. I think it is now to the point where you can realistically have that conversation and nobody should bat an eye if you were wanting to have the conversation if he will be on the team next year.
Craig.
Not should be, just will be.
Chris Jones is going to play all of 2023.
That's not what I asked.
Nope, but that's the take that I have. Chris Jones is going to play in 2023. Absolutely going to play. And we'll see. If he makes it through 2023 without a contract, I have serious doubts that he's going to sign one long-term. It's just another year. All of a sudden, it's another year, and they don't really save much against the cap by doing it.
Ooh, question for you, Kent. Question for you, Kent.
Yeah.
At what point during the regular season do the Chiefs just be like, when's the latest the Chiefs would extend Chris Jones, do you think? Like, at what point are they going to say, we're not doing this at this point in time anymore? Let's get back to this next offseason.
Week or two. I mean, they're not doing this in the season. I don't think it's happening in season. I think you've got another week or two to get a deal done, and that's it. And I think it's closer to, like, it feels like another week. I think a week from now, 10 days from now, I think it's Chris Jones is coming in. No deal has been reached. They're not going to. He's going to play this year out, and then they'll go from there. And what they'll go from there means is he's somewhere else next year. The Chiefs are tagging and trading him. He's getting buku bucks somewhere. The Chiefs are getting some draft capital back for him, and the Chiefs are doing what they did with the Tyreek Hill situation and trying to retool a situation on this team. So that's what I think. I think we're close, guys. We're real close. I think there's a chance that a deal's getting done in season. I don't know about you guys.
I think there's an opportunity. I think that there is a chance that it can happen if Chris shows up, continues to play at the level that he was last year, and shows that he can. Yeah, because it's going to be funny money for the last couple of years of the deal anyway. So I can see them just being like, listen, this dude's just bought in. Like, we got to take care of him.
So what do you think? What tips that scale then, right? Like, if you think it might be done in the end season, what tips the scale? Is he playing so good that the Chiefs just have to pay him, and then therefore they're just going to come up to what his demands are? We think the Chiefs are going to budge in season on that? Or is it that he's not playing quite as well as maybe he would be hoping for? Then he's going to come down to what the Chiefs are offering. And at that point, are the Chiefs still offering it if he's, showing signs of, it's just like, what changes in season that would make one of the two sides budge?
I mean, I think right now there's very hard lines in the sands for both sides that have been drawn. And I think if we get in season and he's playing that level, the Chiefs don't have to come up all the way to his line. Like, I can see them saying, okay, we're coming up a little bit. Here's our compromise point. And, Chris Jones is, people coming down just a little bit to kind of fill that gap. We don't know how big the gap is. We just really don't know how big the gap is right now. If the Chiefs are offering 22 and Chris Jones wants 30, guess what? It ain't happening. But, we just don't know yet.
Man. Yeah, we're getting close, guys. I genuinely, I think we're a week and a half. I think any of the in-season scenarios, the reason this is taking so long is there's really good. I said this the other day on X, whatever X.
No,
I don't
Twitter.
like it on Twitter. I tweeted this out. I think there's good arguments to be made for both sides. I think the reason this is taking so long is there are reasonable sides to take on both sides of this. Maddie talked about some of the downsides where, hey, look, D tackles after 30, not a strong track record. Well, the majority of this next deal is going to be played after 30. Well, Chris Jones was the best defensive tackle in football last year. Absolutely right. Probably should be paid as the second, best defensive tackle in NFL history. I understand all that. So there's fair arguments to be made on both sides. Where we've seen these deals go with the Chiefs, though, in recent memory, is the Chiefs want you to give a little bit. Don't know if Chris Jones is giving a little bit. And if he does, he'll be signed to an extension soon. And if not, he'll be signed to a number he wants in 2024. And the Chiefs will be drafting earlier in the draft, maybe, or something along those lines. It's gonna be interesting. I think we're getting real close. Last day, we're a few hours from July being over. When this release is on the pod channel, it'll be August. So we're running out of time, I think, for a Chris Jones extension to be done. That is going to do it for this episode of the Casey Laboratory. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you to Craig Stout and Maddie Lane for holding down every Thursday all season, where I will be finding some random vacation to take. We love y'all. We'll